just dynamic and wonderful speakers with so much knowledge. Any one of them would be worth going to see them by themselves, and we're just fortunate to have all four of them here with us today. Which leads me to Brother Paul O'Donnell. Brother Paul O'Donnell is with the Franciscans brothers. No, for 6 years. I don't know who he's with. Franciscan Brothers of Peace. They're out of Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Brother Paul joined the pro-life movement in 1973 when he was 13 years old. He became a Franciscan brother in 1984 and has been dedicated to the pro-life movement since that time. Brother Paul's founder, Brother Michael, experienced a bacterial infection, if I remember correctly, and the result of that was in a very similar condition to my sister. The brothers at the time brought Brother Michael home and cared for him for 12 years before he passed away in 2003. So Brother Paul knows firsthand what it is to care for someone with a cognitive disability, and one very similar to my sister Terry's. And in 2000, we met Brother Paul in 2004, and during the, ever since that time, the brothers, the Franciscan brothers, have become very close to our family. And Brother served, I don't know how much you followed Terry's case. I think a lot of you were probably maybe in high school or even before that at the time. But Brother Paul served as a spokesman and also a spiritual advisor for our family at that time. And Brother Paul today is going to speak about food and hydration and the Catholic issue. Brother Paul O'Donnell.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And I want to say that, as Bobby mentioned, I've been involved in the Right to Life movement since I was 13. So I had been well versed in subjects like euthanasia, infanticide, assisted suicide, abortion, and all the life issues. But it really wasn't until my best friend and founder of our community was, as Bobby said, came down with an illness and suddenly became known as a vegetable. And he was my friend. And I was told by chancery officials in our archdiocese it would be perfectly fine not to feed him or not to treat him, and to let him go and be with God. And that we believe in eternal life, and therefore he would be with God in heaven. And I was repulsed by that. I was repulsed by that. They handed me directives that were written in 1982, religious health care directives. In these directives, which the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops at the time approved, it advocated that in some cases it would be okay to remove somebody's food and hydration if this would be a burden to them or their caregivers. Again, I found this shocking because part of this contained elements of an organization now that's called Compassionate Choices. But for 20 years, it was known as the Hemlock Society, a group of individuals that promotes euthanasia, promotes death and starvation of people who are ill or disabled. And as I did further research, some members within religious communities were a part of this organization. And while the bishops in 1982 said many moral theologians say it's okay, we're not convinced of it. And so fast forward a bit to the Schindler family fighting to save the life of their daughter. How I got involved was that there were not any bishops in the church speaking out. Not one. There was no supportive bishop in that diocese. This was a Catholic woman with Catholic parents that wanted to save her life. And I went down there basically to be a spiritual support for them. Little did I know I'd be a thorn in my Archbishop's flesh, because he would see me all over the world when he was in Rome at the Vatican. They fought to save Terry's life. So Pope John Paul II, on March 20th of 2004, issued an allocution which basically said it's morally offensive to refer to anybody as a vegetable or being in a vegetative state. He also said food and hydration, nutrition and hydration, is not medical care. It's ordinary care. Even if it takes a healthcare professional to insert a tube or an IV and to receive that nutrition by artificial means. He said it was obligatory for all practicing Catholics. So you think that our bishops would have responded, but there was great confusion. Great confusion because, like you and I, we've been catechized more by Hollywood and the media than we have by the church. And so, as we struggled to save the life of Terri, and we were not successful, that was a painful, scandalous day in the church. A heartbreaking time in the church. As scandalous as any sex abuse cases that have happened in the church. And this was a family that was heartbroken. I stood by them, and I knew what our Catholic teaching taught us. I knew what was right. But who am I? One little monk talking. So by the grace of God, after Terri passed away, the family and I were privileged to go over to the Vatican, to the Sacred Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. And we talked to officials there, and everything that we proclaimed, everything we said, was what the church taught. We also submitted evidence of Catholic theologians, and there are many of them, like Father Kevin O'Rourke, who advocate starving and dehydrating people, that we presented to them and asked them to reaffirm Pope John Paul II's allocution. The reason we felt that was absolutely necessary is that this philosophy of the 1982 directives that had the organization Compassion and Choices involved was being quoted everywhere and adhered to more than the Catechism of the Church or more than canon law. It was held in such great esteem. So that's why the bishops were not speaking out. That's why they did not get involved. And so, fast forward 2 years later, on September 14th, 2007, the Sacred Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith reaffirmed Pope John Paul II's allocution and said it was official Catholic teaching, and they answered two specific questions. If a person in a vegetative state that has no hope of recovery, are we morally obligated to give that person food and hydration? And the answer came back very simply, yes. And then the second question is this obligatory and what's to be followed? And the answer came back, yes. And it was signed by Pope Benedict XVI. So then, what do you do here in the United States when you have an outdated Catholic healthcare directive that advocates starvation and dehydration? You have a pope in the highest office of the church saying what we are to adhere to, but our own policies in all of our hospitals do the exact opposite. So you fast forward to November 18th, 2 years later. The church moves slow sometimes, so we're going in 2 years increments. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops revised their whole policy on the healthcare directives. This was primarily done because of the life and death of Terri Schindler. The church now clearly emphasizes that these individuals deserve dignity, love, respect, and they are not to be starved and dehydrated to death, and it's obligatory. Now, you think some of our Catholic hospitals, now that the Pope has spoken, the Sacred Congregation of the Faith has spoken, many Vatican officials have spoken, all of our bishops have spoken, there were only 4 dissenting bishops. You think that that would be applied. Well, the problem is, I'm sad to say, is there's an organization called the Catholic Health Association. Just because it has the name Catholic does not mean that it's necessarily good. And the sad reality in just a short period of time is many hospitals were found by religious communities and many women religious communities. And just as we saw in the whole abortion issue where a lot of people got hooked in to buy that somehow abortion was okay, a lot of these religious communities have bought this anti-life philosophy. So as Bobby can tell you, our battle is still oftentimes within Catholic hospices, Catholic institutions, and Catholic healthcare systems to uphold church teaching, and that's part of what we do. It's a sad reality. The next step, and I'm hoping now, fast forward, that now our bishops will sink some teeth into this policy, and we have some good things on the horizons with supporters of Terri's Foundation from Cardinal Burke at the Vatican. So things are moving in the right direction. I would just like to close by encouraging you, as Bobby said, that we need good lawyers. And what is said to people at a vulnerable time, as Kristen said, you know, her child, she's sitting there with a 5-month-old baby and they're telling her, you know, people are so vulnerable and people in the healthcare profession should be supported. And they come in with directives, advanced care directives, these directives. You know, words can be very dangerous. What it means to care for someone and use the term burden is very different in a legal perspective than it is in an emotional or a health perspective. And so when it comes to healthcare directives, ethics committee, feudal care committees, all of these quote death panels, because they are death panels, we need your help. And I hope that in the years to come you'll be with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Paul. I always like to help. I like Brother Paul's non-controversial manner. Anyway, next and finally, we'll have Professor Myers. After Professor Myers speaks, we'll still have some time for some question and answers. We should have about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you have any questions, we'd love to take them from you.